It's time for the monthly update. What happened in the watch world other than watches and wonders in March and April? Well, enough stuff happened that was super interesting that I felt it deserved its own video. Brands are still trying to make pink a thing. Richemont did something that few people noticed, which I found quite interesting. And I feel the need to talk about Breitling. Let's dive in. I try to keep my channel clean and family friendly, but for the grown-ups, when you hear someone say mission to the pink, does your mind go in the direction of a wristwatch? I'm very much over the whole moon swatch thing personally. My stores of hype response are spent, and add to that I'm a vocal critic of the pink trend. Perpetual bismol is not a good looking color on anything, especially not the entire strap and case of a plastic watch. This time around though, the moon swatch is a little bit more interesting because at least it's not just a colorway. This movement has a moon phase, which I feel is appropriate and enough to set the watch apart from the deluge of new regurgitations of moon swatches out there. This watch is for collectors. You have all the Pokemons and all the moon swatches and you have to have this one. OCD people are going to love this or at least be unable to withstand the temptation to buy. For everybody else, I always wonder who pink really appeals to. From my previous videos, I have many women's word for it in the comments that pink doesn't automatically turn them into customers. The number of guys that feel this pink would suit them is probably not a very long list. But yes, it likely will sell and it's positioned as a fun, playful, once in a while quirky watch, and I'm sure there's at least some market for it. The biggest weakness to me is the pink. That and the naming, and that's just because my mind is in the gutter these days. So we have our usual scale. Is it a grail, a buy, a shortlist, a think about it, or are better options out there? Honestly, I think there are better options out there. To those of you that say I'm not a noob when it comes to watches, know this. I had never heard or registered Gallet before, at least not as any more than a type of pancake. Apparently, Breitling brought the brand with the intent to revive them. This is interesting for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, Breitling have been owned in part, at least, by private equity for quite some time. Led by George Kern, the brand has been revamped massively, and every year when you look at data like the Morgan Stanley report, Breitling in general seems to be doing really, really well, both increasing prices and in increasing volumes. Some years they've done better than others, but in general they've been on an upward trajectory. At the same time, Breitling and their owners have thrown money at acquisitions, most notably Universal Genève, with the intent of having a high-end offering in their catalog. Kern himself has said that Universal Genève will start their pricing for a basic time-only steel watch at $15,000. That's a fair bit higher than Breitling and also higher than Zenith or JLC. It's also close, but not quite Patek starter territory. Not that there are many steel 300 dress watches in the Patek lineup, but there were once, I suppose. And now they bought Gallet. What is happening is Breitling is building a conglomerate like Swatch Group. They are going to have something in the upper mid-range, that's Breitling. They're going to have something in the high end, that's Universal Genève. And Gallet are going to be more lower mid. They're not going to be cheap, but likely a bit cheaper than Breitling. On top of that, they've also made a partnership with AMT, the more high-end part of Sellita, and developed a new movement called the B31, which is to be found in the most recently released Top Time model. I'm kind of realizing that this deserves probably a full Breitling video because there's so much interesting going on here. Thought number one is, for once, there's a private equity firm that isn't turning a company into crap. Second topic, when should us watch nerds start taking Breitling seriously? Because honestly, the community doesn't. They're not regarded as Hublot, but there's often this sense that they're not a real watch brand, but more of a consumer brand. And I think that's worth exploring. Question number three, is a conglomerate model with tiers like the one Swatch Group has a good idea? I mean, Swatch clearly can't figure out how to do it. Their talents are clearly towards the cheap end. The different tiers are very different games. And I wonder if Breitling can manage this kind of portfolio with different levels. Yeah, that's definitely a full video. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. And they've also got some top times that are really cool, but that's more of a review. Now, there's going to be a full Breitling video. Now, if you're new here and you're thinking this is turning out to be a decent video, well, then there's the subscribe button. I try to create content that is worthy of your time, and I do my best to cultivate an engaged community. So if you think my videos are for you, then consider clicking that button. It's hugely appreciated. Thanks. There's no video without a new Omega release. It still, to me, feels like they are constantly churning things out willy-nilly. This time, it's a Seamaster Planet Ocean Worldtimer in black for $14,800. For all the techs and specs and materials, the intern at Omega rolled the dice and this time landed on a number that was okay for a change. To me, this is a watch that I instantly think looks cool, but don't like anyway. And why the contradiction? Size, 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 and size. Black ceramic is cool. Metas Worldtimer, cool. Laser ablated titanium globe dial, cool. Embossed bezel in black, cool. But 45.5 millimeters and 17.4 millimeters thick. This is thicker than many Panerai Luminors, and the lug to lug is just as big. Omega with their twisted lugs tend to wear smaller than you expect, but this is not going to wear like a 42 or 40 millimeter. I also felt the original Worldtimer at around 43 millimeters was already a bit large. This is pushing it too far, and I don't understand why the Planet Ocean has to be so big. The other thing that bugs me on a business level is something that has always bugged me about Omega, and that is they just can't stop doing variations, and those variations inevitably cannibalize on other products in their lineup. Think of it this way. What in the Rolex lineup competes with a Daytona? Nothing. It's the only chrono. Same goes for the GMT. Sure, there's the Explorer 2, but the GMT has a couple of color options, and otherwise you can't get the true GMT function in an Oyster Perpetual or a Datejust or a Day-Date. But Omega, they have a Worldtimer already. Why did they need a dive Worldtimer? Which niche of uniquely identifiable, unique customers is this watch serving? I mean, other than men with huge wrists. I honestly feel this watch doesn't do anything more than cannibalize from customers that were likely considering a Worldtimer. I mean, as a consumer, it's great with all the options, but business-wise, it just doesn't make sense to me. Who's it for? It's for people with arms like tree trunks and a Ford F-150 kind of personality. This isn't an understated watch. This isn't a restrained watch. They look great. My wimpy, terrific wrists just can't and won't ever try to pull this off. Honestly, I'd say there are better options out there. I would get the regular Worldtimer in titanium. It's a smidge cheaper and it's smaller in size. This is a little bit of a super nerdy thing, but Richemont disbanded their specialist watchmaker division. Now, the first time I read this headline, I thought, what? They're closing JLC and IWC and Lange & Söhne and Vacheron? And of course, that's not the case. The ultra-simplified version is that all the watch brands at Richemont, except for Cartier, have been managed under a common umbrella. Think of it as an overarching corporate governance that aligns priorities and different business decisions across the watch division. You do something like this in companies because you want to reap the benefits of scale. So an overarching organization can say to one brand, you need to invest in building movements that the other brands can use in their watches. They can say, you can't go to this price point with this watch because that price point is for this other brand that we also control. It can also be a way to go to suppliers in the one end and dealers in the other end and say, hey, if you want this brand, you have to take this brand into your store as well. What the specific mandate of Richemont's watch division isn't completely transparent, but those would be some of the benefits of having that kind of division. But there are downsides as well. Depending on the power and the mandate of the bureaucracy, it can severely limit the leeway of individual brands to make the decisions they feel are right for their individual brand. So IWC might want to do something, but get a no, because that would be bad for JLC or Lange or whoever. What we do know is that retailers in general have felt it was bad because they were sometimes forced into taking products into their lineup that didn't match with their customers. There also seems to be a clear feeling that the watch division would sometimes underserve retailers in situations where they could direct product directly to their own boutiques. That has, according to reports, made for strained relationships between Richemont and independent resellers. Again, Richemont hasn't said why they've made this move, so I can only speculate. My experience with these kind of situations tells me it comes down to a simple conversation that has probably been had multiple times internally in Richemont. Is there more profit in controlling all the brands and trying to find synergies, or is there more profit in allowing each brand to go more their own way, knowing that some might fail but others may flourish? I've got no doubt that the brands themselves likely would love a lot more leeway. CEOs hate being put in a straitjacket. So I think this is part of a move to give more individual mandate to the brands. Basically, Richemont is saying, fine, you say you can make more money on your own, prove it. Personally, I think this is a good thing in the sense that each brand likely now has more leeway to do what they think is right. And more often than not, this does lead to less focus on cost-cutting, standardized mass-produced movements, and more focus on original designs and differentiation. It's going to be interesting to follow for sure. On February 28th, Citizen announced that they are launching Citizen Premier, which is going to be Citizen's new series or lineup of more premium watches. This is a continuation of the Citizen Series 8 watches, which were their higher end offerings that were released a couple of years ago, 2021, I think it was. Now, before you worry that Citizen are going to be costing $20,000, that's not the case. The watches announced are going to be around $1,000 to $2,500, potentially more over time, I suppose. Generally, that's a lot more expensive than we're usually accustomed to from Citizen. But honestly, I think this is a smart business move and a good thing for customers. Citizen make good, cheap watches. Whether it's basic digital watches or classier watches like the Tsuyosa, they've been a very affordable brand for a long time. But times are changing. Profit margin on cheap watches is likely dropping. This is a segment of watches that has been in decline for a long time. Going upmarket like Seiko have done, and a lot of Swiss brands have done, is a smart move. Personally, I also think that Citizen are such skilled producers of watches that they should be able to deliver something of a higher quality that justifies the extra price. Imagine a fully featured Citizen with a modern bracelet with easy adjusts and quick releases. Imagine a mechanical movement with higher accuracy. I think it's about time that Citizen gives some of the Chinese factory brands some competition and also push to compete with the likes of Tissot and Hamilton and all the micro brands sitting at $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000. More options at the level of the Series 8 models and higher is good for us. More Breitling news. Breitling released a navitimer with a perpetual calendar and a chronograph function for $29,500. It's 43 millimeters in diameter, it's close to 15 millimeters thick, and it's the navitimer. Just like some people believe that the old Submariners are the best because they don't have shiny bezels and they look more like tools as opposed to the more luxury looking modern watches, I believe that the best navitimers are the older models that weren't as shiny and as polished and as adorned with sunray dials and premium bells and whistles. That's why I'm partial to Zinn navitimers over most of the premium Breitling navitimers. But Breitling isn't about tool watches anymore. They are about shiny, premium, luxury-looking watches. I love it in a lot of their other models, but I don't, personally, in the navitimer. In fairness, the light blue dial is the best version of the current Breitling navitimer, in my opinion. It's a good look, but there's the size. A little bit of a digression, but an acquaintance of mine asked me recently about which perpetual calendar he should get. And we went down this path of thin perpetuals, like the ones you see from Patek and Vacheron, versus thick perpetuals, like the ones you get from IWC and other brands. We talked about flat movements, we talked about layered and modular movements, we talked about crown-controlled perpetual calendars, and we talked about pusher-controlled perpetual calendars. The movement inside this watch is a modular movement that makes for a thick movement. Personally, I'm in the camp of thin movements for perpetual calendars. For me, perpetual calendars just are something that need to be in a thin case. I appreciate 96 hours of power reserve. I appreciate cost accuracy. I appreciate the math and engineering that goes into making a perpetual calendar. But to me, thinness for perpetual calendars is the thing I prefer. And this Breitling movement just doesn't get me worked up with excitement because of the thickness. Now, who's it for? Breitling make really nice watches. They do not market themselves a lot towards watch nerds. They market to upper mid, lower high-end consumers that want a statement piece. They've got a brand recognition up there with Rolex and Omega, and I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that there are some people that are more strongly Rolex versus Breitling than they are people that are Rolex versus Omega. To some people, Breitling is an equivalent status symbol and brand power of Rolex. Breitling's watches aren't as buff as they once were, but the aesthetic is still very much in the statement piece realm. This watch is for the guy that wants the upgrade navitimer with all the cool functions. Now, personally, I think there are better options out there. I would say buy the 43mm navitimer automatic chrono with the same blue dial, but in a Panda sub-dial type layout for just under $10,000. I think the dial is more balanced and just overall more pleasing aesthetically. And then you go secondary and snag yourself a JLC Master Ultra Thin Perpetual calendar for around $24,000. Sure, you're ending up spending $5,000 more, but if you're paying $29,000 for a watch, you can probably wait 2 months and spend $35,000. This way you get 2 watches and more options. If you get the navitimer chrono secondary as well, then you're going to be under $29,000 for both watches. I just checked my bank account. I don't have $550,000 lying around for a watch. But if I did, I might actually spend them on a Louis Vuitton watch. Specifically the new Kari Vultunen collab Louis Vuitton. This is one of these watches I likely won't ever see in the metal. There aren't a lot made to begin with, and I just don't hang around inside Buckingham Palace, the Burj Khalifa, or some other, South Miami Island mansion enough. Louis Vuitton are by now, believe it or not, a bit of a serious watchmaker. They've invested heavily in making watches with finishings that rival some of the most renowned high-end classic brands. And then you've got this Kari Vultunen guy who is especially renowned for his dial work. He's received 10 GPHG awards. Several of his watches are watches I would one day love to own, and of the few I've seen in the metal, I've always been massively impressed. This watch is for serious collectors and friends of the brand. It's a talking piece among a small group of people who have ridiculous amounts of money, and unlike Patek and AP and other brands that also attract a more mainstream audience, this is for aficionados. The people that own this kind of watch are likely to know a ton about enameling and all other techniques that go into making this kind of watch. The downside is that there are only 5 being made, so you need to get in line quickly. And $550K is real money, but not for the people who are in this target audience. Since introducing my ranking system, I almost haven't called anything a grail yet. So far, it's only the Chopard Quattro. I'm close to calling this a grail piece, but I'm not quite there. But it definitely is a buy it if you can, which you probably can't, and neither can I, so it doesn't matter, but it's a really cool watch. That's it. What do you think of the move Breitling has made with Gallet? What about the modern Breitling navitimer? Are you in team yes or in team no? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.